Hello, this is Court bringing you the first of the Season 11 Lichess4545 game reviews. We had a lot more nominations this season, and we have some really awesome games lined up that I'm really excited to bring you guys. And I also have some cool ideas about how I'm going to present those games. So not for this one. This one's going to be a little bit more standard, but you know, we got some cool stuff coming up the pipe. Keep your ears posted. Your ears posted. Pay attention. That's the point. So in this game, this is our board 6 game. We always start with the lowest board. And this is a game between Meangreen, rated 1446, and Donkey-Kong16, rated 1365. And before we get started with this game, I have to say, both players played a very good game. If you had showed me this game and said it was played between like two 1900 rated Lichess players, I'd be like, yeah, sure, I believe it. They both played really good chess. They both had logical plans in the middle game, and that's mainly what we're going to be talking about this game, is middle game planning and also this idea of prophylaxis. So let's dive right in. Meangreen opening up with 1d4, black playing d6, pretty uncommon move. Black here is signaling that maybe he's going to play the modern, or, as he did in the game, he's going to play the Philidor. I have to say, the Philidor is a little bit suspicious if white doesn't play c4. I mean, so knight d7 isn't a true Philidor, but it really is signaling that black's going to play e5 with a Philidor position, which is much better if white plays c4. Here, e5 is very good because white has already committed this pawn to c4, which means the bishop is locked in. And we'll see in the game that because c4 hasn't been played, white has a lot more flexibility. White plays the far superior move e4. Black can still play the modern if he wants, but okay, he's going to play the Philidor. Knight f3, it's a good move. Let's develop, control the center. c6. Okay. It's a playable move. Here, I mean, we said A, I would say B, but c6 should be fine. Knight c3, good move. Let's develop all our pieces. Makes sense. Black goes e5, that was his whole idea, but white showcases the flexibility of his setup and how the fact that his pawn on c4 has not been committed yet. Because after e5, white has the option of going bishop c4. And this bishop is very well placed on c4 because normally when the bishop comes to c4, black wants to play e6 and sort of shut down this diagonal in these modern-esque setups. But that's no longer a possibility with the move e5 included. So the bishop on c4 is very powerful, staring down this f7 pawn. And black actually has white actually has a very nice idea connected with this move. I should mention that from this position, white has an enormous score in master play. I think white scores something like 80%. It's kind of disgusting. Which means that black should probably reconsider this opening system. It's not that the Philidor is bad, but like this c6, e5, like, if white doesn't play c4, you probably shouldn't be playing the Philidor. You should probably be playing the modern instead, because this is just very good for white. I also have a feeling that white prepared this line. Maybe black plays this a lot, and white sort of prepared this, because white played some very unintuitive moves in the opening that are very good. Okay, black develops his pieces, and here white plays very strongly. It's not such a normal move, but white has this nice idea, d takes e5. And normally this is maybe not so strong because black gets this strong e5 square for his knight, and the knight usually wants to go either to e5 or c5 once the d-pawn has been removed. But here, knight takes e5 is actually simply unplayable. After knight takes e5, you must recapture, and white just wins. f7 is indefensible. Knight h6, I take it. You're still getting slammed on f7. So the point of white's play here, taking here, is that black is forced to take with the pawn, which is not so bad in and of itself, but we'll find in the game that this knight on d7 is very, very unhappy. Now, white followed up this capture with another very powerful move, and this is the move that makes me think white prepared this line. And the move is knight g5, which when you first look at it, you're like, what? Because this knight is attacked twice and defended only once. So black made the very logical decision and said, I'll take the piece. But this allows white to really showcase the point of his idea. And the point of playing knight g5 is not that the knight is so superb on g5. What it's really doing is opening the avenue for the queen. And this queen h5 move, it comes with a double threat, a threat on f7 and a threat on g5, which means that white actually regains the piece by force here. So, very briefly, we should return to this position where white has just played knight g5 because there is another option for black. Black can, if black sees this queen h5 tactic, black can say, well, I don't really want to take your knight. I'm going to develop a piece, that's good, and defend f7. And after this move, white actually has a very powerful move. So if you'd like, this will be our first puzzle. Pause your video and see if you can find a very, very strong move for white. It's not quite winning, but it's close. It's close to winning. So hopefully you took some time to find the move for white. The move here is the incredible knight e6. Hoo hoo hoo, what a move. And white is just saying, I would like to open this diagonal. This knight must be accepted because the knight is forking the queen on d8 and the pawn on g7, so you must play fe6. And now, white does not play queen h5. This would be a blunder because after knight f7, black defends his life. But first, white takes on h6. And this move is very problematic because you've removed one defender of f7, and if the pawn captures, you've removed the other defender of f7, this g-pawn. So just to show a sample variation, pawn takes, queen h5, there's no g6 anymore because the g-pawn has been decoyed. King f8, bishop e6, I'm threatening mate. You have only one move that defends the f7 square, which is queen e8. And here you might be like, oh, black has saved himself by defending f7. But unfortunately, when you played queen e8, you took away the e8 square from the king, allowing queen h6 mate. The king no longer can run to e8. So that's just a sample of the dangers that lie after knight e6. The reason this isn't totally winning is after bishop h6, black can choose to not capture this this bishop, but it's very clear that black's position is in shambles. He'll have these isolated double e-pawns for the rest of the game, which means that black just has a terrible position. So that is why knight h6 really should not be played in this position. Black played the best move, which is taking the knight. And after queen h5, black played queen e7, defending f7. He has no choice. He must give back the piece. If black goes knight h6, this is a huge mistake because after bishop g5, all of a sudden I have a double threat on the queen and the threat of removing the guard of f7. So sample variation after queen b6, let's say. I simply take, I'm on f7, so you would have to castle, you would be down a piece. And this is clearly winning for white. So after queen h5, queen e7, and white recaptures the peach. The piece. You can capture with the bishop, but then black goes knight f6, wins a tempo on the queen. Black starts to get his life in order. So I actually like this move, queen takes g5. And this presents black with a choice. White says, hey black, would you like an endgame? And this is an interesting moment for black, because black is maybe very, very slightly behind the development, but not so much, right? It is only the first move, or the tempo that white gets at the start of the game that he's behind. For instance, after a developing move, black will equalize in development. So the queens being on don't really pose a huge threat to black, but I think the endgame after queen g5 is really quite poor for black, because I see this ending, and what I see is white has two bishops, and black simply has no compensation for these two bishops. These knights will not be very strong in this position. The knight on f6 doesn't have a great future. This knight on d7, he can go to c5, but I mean, white can always boot him out if he wants. So these knights are not very strong. Meanwhile, both bishops have very nice diagonals. This just looks incredibly pleasant for white. So after queen takes g5, I very, very much like the move that black played. I thought he made a good decision. He said, I'm going to keep the queens on. The ending doesn't look very appealing to me. So he develops a piece and prevents the queen trade. I think this is a good decision. And this actually leaves an interesting choice for the white player. White has to decide, would he like to take on g7? I mean, black offered him this g7 pawn. And the answer turns out to be probably not. After this sample variation, queen g7, rook g8, of course, the queen has but one square. Black will regain the pawn on g2, and I'm not claiming that white is any worse here, but white sort of had this nice, pleasant position. He's got two bishops. He can grind a nice, slow game. And here he's allowed a mess to open up on the board. And there's really no reason to allow such a messy continuation when you can just play solid chess and have a nice advantage with your two bishops. So I like that white did not play queen g7. I think that's the right decision. However, I do think that white did not find the best move in this position. So let's pause here and imagine we're the white player. The opening has really sort of concluded here. We've just played our nice, like, tactical idea of queen h5, queen g5, and so we're sort of starting a new phase of the game. Maybe we've just gotten out of our preparation. We had prepared this idea, but now we're not exactly sure what we want to do, so we should take a think here. And when we're thinking, there's always two things to consider. What are my ideas? And what are my opponent's ideas? So, as white, my main idea would be, you know, to like develop pieces and castle. That's a good idea, right? So, white played castles, which is a perfectly acceptable move. But white did slightly ignore his opponent's ideas here. So, if I look at this position, I look at black's position, and I say, well, what does black need to do? So black is clearly going to castle at some point. And then black is going to try and sort out something to do with this piece on c8. Because the bishop currently is just horrendous. And one of the main ways of developing this bishop is by playing b5, winning a tempo on my light square bishop, and then putting the bishop out here on b7. I'll try and get c5 and have a decent game. So I think to myself, well, can I make that a little bit harder for black? And the answer is absolutely. The move a4 comes to mind. Just saying, no b5. Get out of here with your adventurous pawns. And here, white has a really nice position, because white has some nice space on the queen side, white has two bishops, and white has these two pluses. He's not behind in development, so he doesn't have really any negatives, no huge weaknesses in his position. So white just has a stable advantage in this position. Whereas after the move castles, black can go b5. Black didn't go b5, he castled. Again, I think white should go a4, but he played bishop e3, which develops his piece. And now black finally went b5. Very good. Black is expanding on the queen side, and he's going to develop his light square bishop over here on the queen side. This is very reminiscent of the Slav defense, where black will take on c4, forcing bishop takes c4, and then play b5, winning time, developing his bishop, and eventually unleashing it with c5. So after b5, bishop e2. Yeah, the bishop doesn't have much of a future here on b3, especially after a move like a5, just gaining more space. So I like this decision to drop back to e2. I think it's a good one. The bishop also doesn't do very much on d3, so this is clearly the best square. And now I very much don't like black's next move. So let's talk about middle game planning and how we decide plans in the middle game. There are two places that we can look for plans in the middle game. We can look at the structure, and we can look at our pieces. So we've likely heard of this idea of when you're not sure what to do, improve your worst placed piece. And we also have ideas based on the pawn structure that we should know. So here, I just played b5, gaining space on the queen side, and this reminds me of the Slav defense. We already talked about this, and in the Slav defense, I know that I want to play bishop b7 and c5. So here, it makes a ton of sense for me to play bishop b7 by both metrics. This is what the structure expects of me, and this is clearly my worst placed piece, so I'm going to improve that worst placed piece to a better square. There are sort of two ideas that are telling me this is a good move. And after white, improves his rook or something, first I play a6, lending support to this pawn, and I'm going to go c5. And I'm going to have a nice bishop on b7. I'm still not thrilled about this knight, but it's not so bad for black. But instead of this, after bishop e2, black did not improve his pieces. Black did not play normal moves within the structure. Black played b4. And this is a move I struggle to get behind. The reason is black is really creating weaknesses for himself. All of a sudden, we see that these pawns are very sort of stretched out, and white's going to be able to crack open the queen side and create weaknesses either with a3 or c3. So this is not a decision that I'm very happy with. We'll find this often in sort of lower level chess, that if you just wait around, your opponent will create weaknesses in their own position. And that's what black is doing here. He's creating weaknesses in his own position just to attack the knight. And the knight can always go back, but this b4 pawn can never go back to b5. It's always going to be weak here. So I think this was a very poor decision. Knight a4 played, very sensible. The knight does not want to go to anywhere back here, so he goes to a4. Black plays rook e8. Black says, I'm tired of being pinned forever. And he's actually introduced the threat of taking on e4 by breaking the pin, so white plays the very logical f3. And now black goes a5. Black says, okay, I have a pawn way out here. I'm going to protect it. He also has another idea behind this move. He's recognized that this is a very poor piece, and he would like to exchange this piece via putting it on a6. And here, let's pause for a moment, think of a plan for white. So, as white, I have a couple structural ideas that I've already mentioned. a3, c3, just trying to pry open these weak queenside pawns. And I also have a couple pieces that I'd like to improve. These rooks aren't currently doing very much, and the knight is not so happy to be out in the boondocks on a4. So there's plenty of good moves for white here. Rook f d1 makes a lot of sense to me. The reason I go with the f rook is that there is some possibility of the a rook playing on the a file if I play a3 and sort of crack open. So this f rook really isn't doing much. I would play the f rook to d1. Or the move played in the game is also very good. b3. This is a very strong idea. White says, I don't like my knight way out here on the rim. Knights on the rim are dim. I want him to come back into the game. And the only way this knight is coming back into the game is through the b2 square, because black actually has firm control over these two squares, b6 and c5, so the knight must return via b2. This is a very nice middle game maneuver. White's just improving one of his bad pieces. I think this is a very logical plan. And the knight's actually going to find a very powerful home on c4. This is part of the problem with this move b4 that was played. Not only is the pawn itself weak, but whenever a pawn advances, it weakens squares around it. And the knight is going to take very nice advantage of this c4 square. Black continues with his idea, bishop a6. White is not so opposed to the trading of these bishops. His own bishop on e2 is not the most powerful piece in the world, but black has at least eliminated the advantage of the two bishops. But we see it's come at a slight cost. Black now, his pieces are very, very uncoordinated. This rook on a6 is very clumsy. It doesn't really want to be on a6. It's hanging currently. It's not connected with his other rook. We also see that black's knights are having a hard time playing. This knight on d7 doesn't really have anywhere good to go. It can't go to c5. It's not happy on b6. Where's it going from b6? Not really anywhere. This knight on f6 is also having a hard time finding a place to go. Can't go to d5. Maybe later to h5, but not currently. I would, in a dream world, want to go knight e8, d6. But even on d6, it's not so great. So black is having some severe coordination issues, whereas white is really not having any coordination issues. All his pieces are on great squares. This bishop on e3 is very powerful. The knight will find a great square on c4. This rook will come to the nice open file. So white has a nice plus here because all his pieces just make more sense. And the reason behind that is, one, black really compromised his structure. He created weaknesses and nice squares. But two, black's knights are also very clumsy, and they can't really find squares to go to. So white follows through on his idea, knight b2. Black goes c5. it covers up a little bit the weakness of the c5 square, and hints that, okay, maybe I'll play c4, maybe I'll play a4. Those are really the only ideas that black can play for. It's sort of strange when you look at black's position. Black doesn't have much to do. These, like we talked about, these pieces can't really improve. So black, his only playable ideas are to go c4 or a4. Sort of a depressing position, really. So white continues to improve his pieces. Rook fd1. I actually like this move a lot. You might say, well, he just put his knight on b2. Why not go knight c4? And the answer is, this actually helps black complete his idea. Because now black gets to slightly make sense of his pieces after knight b6. And the reason this is so powerful is this knight on d7 has just been so useless the entire game. So black is saying, please let me trade this knight. And as white, if you say no, I don't want to trade the knight, if you go back to b2 or d2, let's say b2, leave the d file open, now black actually gets to execute his only idea, which is to play a4 or c4. And the knight on b6 is actually doing a good job supporting this, and white sort of lost to tempi by playing these moves knight c4 back to b2. So I like that in this position, white was not in a rush to play knight c4. I think he realized that after knight b6, he doesn't really want to trade those knights. That's not a trade he's interested in, trading his really powerful knight for such a stupid knight on d7. So rook d1, very good. And now it's hard for black to make a move. Black should probably play knight b6 anyway, but the issue is white has really improved most of his pieces. So he improved this bad piece on a4, he improved this bad rook on d1, and now it's time to go for those structural ideas we talked about. And white is actually going to implement one of his structural ideas while improving his last sort of poor piece, a3, very, very strong. The idea is, I'm going to crack open the queen side, give you some more weaknesses, and I'm going to make sense of my last piece who's not playing. That's why we played the f rook to d1, because we want this file to open up. We want the a rook to play along the a file. And all of a sudden, black sort of goes like, now we see the issue with this rook being on a6. That's not very nice. Black's best move may be to play rook on a to a8. And here, after something like takes, now this knight still doesn't want to jump in, still doesn't want to sort of split itself off. But now we ask ourselves, what is white's last piece who's not really doing their job? And we see, okay, this knight can't really go anywhere right now. If I ever play knight d3, black will go c4 likely. So the knight is okay. Both these rooks are great. The bishop is super well placed, attacking a weak pawn. And we see, hold on a minute. What's this queen doing out here on g5? What's she up to? Come on, queen, you gotta do something better than just chill out on g5. And so here white can go queen h4 with the idea of queen f2, and that's just very powerful. And white just has a very, very comfortable position here. So that is if black chooses to play knight b6, probably the best move. Black instead played rook c6. And it's hard to fault black for this move. I mean, black is signaling that he wants to go c4 here. Maybe go knight b6 and then c4. But the problem is White just has too much of a lead in development. This plan is too slow for the position because White sort of executes a similar idea as the previous line. He plays a3, but now you have sort of an added problem that your rook is no longer on the a file. You're not going to contest the a file anymore. So White is actually going to control the a file here and the d file. As Black, I really need to connect these rooks and contest a file. So rook c6, probably not best. a3 is very powerful. B takes a3. This is a little bit of a strange move, but Black actually had a very nice idea associated with this move, which was showcased in the game. Because B takes a3, it looks a little strange. You're like really shattering your own queenside structure. But in the game, we saw what happens. After rook takes a3, Black realized, hey, this rook is going to be unprotected on a3. And that means I'm going to get my chance to sort of liquidate the queenside with the move c4, with a discovered attack on the rook, while also discarding one of my weak pawns. And also sort of limiting the weakness of the c4 square, which the white knight was always going to take a nice resonance on. So let's briefly go back, because I think this is actually one of the huge mistakes of White in this game. White's played very, very well up to this point. And after ba3, you should think a bit, because Black's played a slightly strange move. And so you should think, okay, why is Black taking on a3? That's a little bit odd. And then you see this idea, rook a3, c4. Okay, that's slightly problematic, right? That's a annoying double attack. I wonder if I can prevent this move c4 somehow. Oh, well, I can. I can play knight c4. And now, after knight c4, you're not playing c4. I guarantee it. If you do, I'll call the arbiter. So this is really, really problematic for Black, because Black has just compromised his own structure with this very concrete idea of liquidating the queenside, and White throws in this little in-between move and says, hey Black, your entire idea doesn't work. And that's the power of thinking about your opponent's ideas, prophylaxis, and preventing them. Because now this move makes Black's move b takes a3 look really, really silly. And if White had found this, he would have had a massive advantage here. He's just going to scoop. This pawn is so weak after the other rook comes. Black is probably going to lose a pawn, either on a5 or c5. But okay, in the game, Black had a chance to showcase his idea. And now it becomes a little bit less clear. In fact, White might not have much advantage at all. After rook takes a5, you have to do something about your rook. You might as well take a pawn. cb3, cb3. And White is currently up a pawn, but this pawn is very weak. And all of a sudden, Black actually has some activity. Like this rook is no longer so dumb. This rook can find occupation, maybe on b8 or c8, and Black's pieces make more sense than they just did. However, Black immediately follows this up with a mistake. Black had the right idea. Black sees, you know, these pieces over here. There's some discoordination. Now, all of a sudden, White's rooks are discoordinated. So Black immediately wants to take advantage of the discoordination in White's camp. So Black played queen e6. But I don't think Black was really considering what White wants to do. He wasn't considering White's ideas. Because ever since like move 10, White's had this whole idea of going knight c4. And when you play queen e6, attacking b3, what you're really doing is you're inviting White to complete his idea. So we don't want to help our opponents complete their ideas. That seems like super obvious, but we won't know if we're helping them if we don't know what their ideas are. So before I play this move queen e6, I have to consider, oh, does white want to play this move? And the answer is, yeah, he does. So let's not play queen e6 then. It's not a very useful move. Much stronger in this position is a similar idea. I want to attack the queenside weaknesses, but I'll do it from b4. And now knight c4 would be a pretty stupid move, because I'll take b3 and you have everything hanging. A lot. So after queen b4, it's actually not so clear what white plays here, because all of a sudden his pieces are not happy. He probably has to drop back, because this threat of taking b3, attacking everything, is quite annoying. So when you take b3, I don't want everything to be hanging. And the knight comes to d3, and this is a position, but, you know, 4 pawns each, active queen, my rook has a file all of a sudden. I think black shouldn't be too much worse here. But again, this was not played queen e6. White played rook d3, which was very strange to me. I don't know why the rook is happy on d3. I would play knight c4. The knight is very happy on c4. The rook is not so happy on d3. Okay, rook d3. Here, black plays rook a6. This is a good move. White's rook on a5 is very active. It should be taken off the board. Knight c4 from white. Yeah, we have an interesting moment here. Both players refuse to resolve the tension. Here, white doesn't take. I think this is understandable, because after queen takes, I mean, this is hit. There's this idea of queen a1 check. So knight c4 is sensible. Well, here black plays rook e8, keeping the tension here. This is not a move I like. The reason is I want to take this. You sort of hear about how, like, oh, you shouldn't resolve the tension, or like you should keep the tension, right? But that's only true if resolving the tension doesn't benefit from you. And after rook takes, knight takes, I sort of wonder, like, is this knight happy to be on a5? And the answer is no, of course not. The knight has no desire to be on a5. And the other point is I get a massive amount of activity. I go rook a8, attacking the knight. You should go knight c4. b4 is not a good idea. After knight b6, and all of a sudden this knight has a new square, c4. Remember, when pawns move forward, they leave weak squares. So I don't want to play b4 and give up that square. So knight c4, but you know, now that's some activity for black. So all of a sudden, white needs to be a little bit careful. Black has a very active rook. You know, black will play h6 to clear back rank and try and get these knights hopping and skipping. It's still hard to move the knights, but I mean, you got to make the most of your position. So I don't like this move. I want to send the knight to a5 where it's stupid, because now white takes. I mean, he sort of has to. Takes, and rook d1 is a good move. White sort of denies black the very active rook. h6, just securing the back rank. This knight really couldn't move until the back rank had been opened up. Queen h4 and queen e7. And here, as white, you have to wonder, what's this move about? Queen e7? What are you doing? You're putting yourself in a pin? No, black has a very clear idea here. Black has this very clear idea. He wants to go queen b4. He's sort of fixing his previous mistake where he played queen e6 instead of queen b4. He says, like, okay, that was dumb. Let's get the queen where it belongs, on b4. But if you recognize this as white, you have to ask yourself, can I prevent it? And the answer is absolutely. We talked earlier about how this queen is doing literally nothing over here. Let's get her back into the game, prevent black's idea. From now until when it's played, like 7 moves from now, the best move for white is almost always queen e1. The queen's not doing anything. She needs to join the game. So queen e1 would have been very strong. White played h3 with the idea of giving his king some shelter, but black very clearly signaled his idea. You should prevent this idea. Queen b4, rook b1. Okay, you had to guard your pawn. And now black played not a good move, rook c6. Why are we moving this piece? This piece is great. It's on a nice open file. I know you create a one-move threat, but white's not an idiot. Or you shouldn't think that white won't see your threat. That's hope chess. That's not good chess. White's gonna see that you created the threat of rook c4. He's gonna protect it. And all you've done is made your piece worse. The rook is not better on c6 than it was on a6. So let's go back to middle game planning. What should we be doing as black? Well, we don't really have any structural ideas because it's 4 on 4 against the king side. I don't want to push my king side. I need to improve my pieces. And the move that's screaming to be played in my eyes is the move knight c5. The reason being, these knights have spent 29 moves being useless. Absolutely useless. And now on move 29, I finally have a chance for this knight to pretend to do something. I want it to do that. So knight c5 is the move where I'm like, please, dear God, let my knight do something this game. And this is just clearly better than rook c6, where I've actually deproved one of my pieces. You know, opposite of improved, I deproved it. White defended the threat, bishop d2. Once again, he should play queen e1. The bishop was very happy on e3. Queen b5, renewing the threat. White played knight a5, putting his knight on the rim, defending the threat. White should play queen e1, defending the threat. This defends the rook. Like I said, the queen e1 is the best move every move, because the queen's not doing anything. And all these pieces are doing something. This queen is not doing anything. So knight a5, okay. The rook goes back to a6, where it should have, well, it should have been here already, but now the rook is less good on a6. Like, black continues to move his rook from an open file to a closed file. Right now the file is closed by the knight, but it's still closed. And the rook is attacked. Put it on the 7th. Rook's on the open files, put him on the 7th. Right? It's just simple chess. This is the stuff we learn. You put your rook on an open file, you put it on the 7th rank. Great. It's attacking the bishop, or like white has to do something about this. He goes queen e1. Okay, now my knight comes in. My position makes some sense. So again, rook a6, putting a rook on a closed file. Not good. Rook a1 played. Hey, guess what? We should play queen e1. But okay, I'll stop beating a dead horse. Rook a1, knight c5, good. I bring my knight into the game, and oh, thank the Lord Jesus, white plays queen a1. Finally, this queen rejoins the game. She's been off on the king side for 25 moves, not doing anything. Now she's back in action. And here, it's sort of interesting. This is what tends to happen in lower level games. Both sides have actually played a really great, complicated game full of like strategic implications, and black just loses the game in one move by not considering all the forcing moves in the line he calculated. So black just played knight c5. He's attacking this pawn twice. It's only defended once, so he goes, oh great, free pawn. But this actually loses on the spot. Because when you play a forcing line, you need to analyze checks, captures, and threats. So after knight b3, you should see what happens when he takes it. So there's two variations to analyze. White takes. So the first thing I'm like, okay, great, I take back. And then I realize, oh, wait, my rook is hanging. Okay, that's not good. So we go back and we go, aha, I'm very clever. I'm going to include the exchange of rooks. And then you see the other problem, the knight can take it. And all of a sudden the knight's not hanging anymore. So there's two possible reasons that this happened. Well, I'd say there's three possible reasons that this happened. The first is black simply didn't calculate past this point. He said, 2 attackers, 1 defender's great. But that's simply too superficial. When you're making captures, when you're playing forcing lines, you have to make sure they work. And with a 45-second increment, that's actually plenty of time to make sure that this is working. It only took me 20 seconds to analyze that. So it's possible that black simply did not consider past the first move. It's also possible that black made a visualization error. And the reason I say this is it's very easy to miss the fact that rook a1 can be met by knight a1 because the knight's not currently on b3. So you have to picture that knight on b3 ahead of time and be like, ooh, there actually really is that capture, knight a1. And that's simply something that comes with more practice and more training. The more you train your calculation, your visualization abilities, the better they will be. Because you have to see in this position that after rook a1, knight a1 is legal because the knight has showed up here. So I think it's likely that black just made that visualization error, and then unfortunately the game is simply lost. We'll quickly see how white converted this. Oh, I should mention, if black can't play knight b3, we should talk about what black should play. So again, we have to think about middle game planning. We're still in a middle game. This is still very much a middle game. Black needs to continue to improve his pieces. So one move that I probably should look at is this move knight d3. I attack the queen, and this knight on d3 is very nicely placed. Maybe I'll go to b2, maybe b4 even if the queen moves somewhere else. I mean, after a move like queen e2, this does establish a pin, but it's a little bit difficult to pile up on this pin. So black also has this idea of bringing the other knight around to a better square and supporting the d3 knight. So this is a strong piece for black. The other move that I would consider is something to get this knight playing, right? Because this knight is just not in the game. It doesn't exist. So I would be looking at these moves, trying to get the knight doing something. The knight here maybe will come around. The knight here will probably come to c5, maybe even b6 at some point. Although, I have to say the knight on b6 is really quite terrible unless the b3 pawn can be eliminated. So those would be better alternatives, but we'll quickly see how white finished the game. Knight h5, black tries to get his knight playing, white's knight comes back, check, block, knight, attack the queen, trade queens, no thanks. This is probably a practical mistake. The reason is knight e2, after king f2, unfortunately both your pieces are hanging, so you're forced to trade queens, which means you just lose. The knights come off. This is just easily winning. White trades pawns. I don't know what that h5 is about. And yeah, white just has an extra piece, and he wins. Here we go. And that's a zugzwang. Black will lose his last pawn, and the g pawn will run up the board. So in this position, Donkey-Kong16 resigned. Like I said, I was really impressed with this game. Both players showed a lot of powerful strategic thinking. And they both had like good ideas, improving their pieces, pawn breaks. And I think if both players learn to consider their opponent's ideas more, both players will see really big increases in rank. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if both players are already higher rated. So yeah, really, really wonderful game. A strong caliber of play from our board sixes. I hope you enjoyed this video. There will be 5 more, of course. So, until the next video, sayonara.